We move on very quickly with the next session, which is the Colombo Accord. Before we do that, I'd like to tell you all that we are absolutely modernized. I did tell you that we have an Instagram account, so if you want to follow us on Instagram, the Instagram handle is Global Pulses. Our Twitter handle is Sissels Iftik. Facebook, of course, is Sissels Iftik, and I'm sure all of you have downloaded the app. It's available on Android and on iOS. The app is GP Convention. You have to log in with the email ID that you have used to sign up for this convention. And once more to remind you that questions are also going to be updated. You don't have to send a mic around or take a slip of paper. If you have a question, all you have to do is go to slido.com. That's SLIDO.com. The hashtag there is Pulses 2018. You can post your question. It'll come up on screen and on the monitors for the presenters and speakers to then engage you. The panel is already ready for the Colombo Accord. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to invite the panelists on stage. First and foremost, President GPC, who will also moderate the panel, Hussein Arsalan. Sir. On the panel, GPC Executive Vice President Cindy Brown. President Clara Marcelo Soto. CEO of Pulse Canada, Gordon Bacon. CEO APA, Tim McGreevy. IPGA India Representative, Saurabh Bhartia. Vijay Iyengar, Singapore, Myanmar. Teodoros Yilma, Ipospia Representative. From Pulse Australia, Peter Wilson. And IBRAFI President Marcelo Luders. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll hand you over to the panel. Thank you.
So, on. You hear me? No. Always. You hear? Yeah. Always, ladies one is the best. Though they give the man is not the good one, and then you. Hello? Yeah. Ask for the man. Now more. This way. Okay. So during my opening speech, I also underlined about the Colombo Accord. This accord is very important for our industry because the intervention has been usual in the world by the governments. But the problems that we started to face, intervention becoming a deadly intervention. Like increase of 10–20% of the duties is accepted the normal in our industry in this long period of time. Later things started to go 50%, 60%, then it goes to over roof. And also limiting on the quantities, quantitative restrictions, and the problems on the plant quarantine issues, overreacting with overruling international agreements like Montreal Protocol. Montreal Protocol says you should reduce using methyl bromide, and the government's insisting to have the methyl bromide fumigation. So these things are started to pile up, not only from the one country, but this is kind of a virus spreading all the world. And when you look at this as a peak body of the industry, we had to do something. As we always maintain our positions for the increase of the consumption and increase of the production, they should understand that we are vocal on the fair trade of the pulses. So there should be balance in these things. And as a confederation, Global Pulse Confederation, and as I am a president, I will pursue to WTO through our national association. These Colombo Accord rules, especially on the trade side, is very, very important to talk to our governments, hear how our industry stands, and we want our governments to support these ideas at every stage on international organization, not only limited with the International World Trade Organization, but in all avenues that possible to defend this position, including the bilateral negotiation between government to government. So we have to lobby for our food. You are not lobbying for somebody else. This decision is affecting Argentinian and Australian and Japanese and Turks and Russian and Ukrainian. So these things are very important. The Confederation, whatever possible in our hand, we will do. So we want your support in this. Here on this table, we have from different nations, we have presentations here. We could bring it more, but we didn't want to be too crowded and take a lot of your time. But these are the main producing and exporting countries that they want to raise the issues around it. And also, we are also same time, like I am from Turkey, we are importing. Brazil is importing the bean, and you can see all these things. So this needs to be balanced. So I would like to thank our participants and panelists, and to you, of course, listening to us. You know, pulse traders, generally, they don't attend this kind of panels. They consider this boring panels. And you are right. Because these conversations here, you think is not going to bring you the profit. But you should think that this meeting will affect your profit and business in near future, not later than 5 years. So thank you for your listening us, and we need all of your support, not only on dear people with the nation federations or GPC, we need your individual supports to support Colombo Accord at every level and talk to your politicians. This is the Colombo Accord, this is our food, you have to protect it. So thank you very much for all of you becoming here. So now I want Jordan to talk about the framework and how we do, what is the behind of all things.
Thanks, Mr. President. And, I'll this mic. Not sure whether, there we go. Sounds like it's working now. Mr. Arslan, you really hit the head when you talk about our focus as a Global Pulse Confederation needing to be balanced between many interests. We have to encourage production in countries around the world. We have to encourage more utilization of pulses to provide that stable market base. A key partner in all of this are governments around the world. And I think that as trade, we need to partner with our governments to make sure that they're doing things that they're allowed to do, but doing them in a way friendly and helpful to the trade. And so I think that one of the key things of the Colombo Accord is that we
You hear me? This is the first problem of Colombo Accord. So a lot of problem on the way. Don't get tired. Try to focus.
All right, so I think that what I think is key, and we have some really good examples recently with what's happened in global pulse trade, is that it's not just good enough for governments to do the things that they are allowed to do, that they are in their right to do. We want to encourage governments to do things in a way that is also helpful to the trade. And as Mr. Arslan mentioned, many of us have woken up to find out that policies have changed overnight and have impacted your business, the returns to farmers, and the stability in the global pulse trade environment. So I think a key part of the Colombo Accord is to find agreement across nations, across companies who are involved in the trading business, and then approach our national governments, approach multilateral government agreements, and say we need to work together as the private sector and government to do things in a less trade disruptive way. And I'll just cite 3 specific examples that I think are really key. We want to make sure that we have a predictable trade environment. We want to ensure that there's transparency in what governments do. And as governments change their policies, which they are entitled to do, we want to make sure that trade is given full consideration so that change is made in a trade-friendly way. I'll give you some examples. The introduction of tariffs, which can be allowed under WTO, still need to be done in a predictable and transparent way. Governments have the right to increase tariffs, will decrease tariffs, but there needs to be some transparency as to what's driving those decisions. So we'll just use India as an example because, of course, it's the market that fully accounts for 1/3 or more of global trade and has embarked on a policy of self-sufficiency. And I welcome and wish them great success. But India's actions will also have an impact on countries around the world. And so I think as the trade, we want to find a way to engage constructively to make sure that we can find some predictable and transparent ways to see these tariffs increase to their maximum, if that's what India chooses to do, but also understand at what conditions those tariffs will come down. So I think, the key part of Mr. Arslan's slide at the beginning was talking about predictability and transparency in trade policy. And as a GPC, I think we're united in that view, and now we find how we can do that in a constructive way working with Government of India. I want to talk briefly about fumigation policy. This industry respects the need to look after human health and environmental health. It's one of the cornerstones of every company's reputation, and it's certainly the reputation that we want to be known for. It's interesting that the International Plant Protection Convention was the first multilateral agreement signed back in 1951, where countries agreed to protect the human health, the environmental health, but they also agreed that this needs to be done in the least restrictive way. It needs to be done based on scientific principles. So when we start looking at issues of how to keep weeds out of country, how to keep diseases out of country, how to keep pests out of the country, I think the Global Pulse Confederation can support these principles of the International Plant Protection Convention, and again, work with governments to ensure that as they do their job to provide environmental protection, that they're taking into account how the trade will have to function with those rules. And one of the very specific asks, Mr. Arslan, is that cargoes en route would be exempt from changes in policies. We have to have advance notice when there's major policy changes. So one of the specific requests is that as rules are changed, that they would apply at least to the announcement would be effective for bills of lading that are issued after the policy change. So it's kind of one of the key things that we want to look at there. And maybe I'll just stop and share the panel with a few of the other panelists up here. But I think the key themes that we want to pick up with the Colombo Accord are predictability and transparency of trade, and collaboration with government to ensure that their actions are taken in a way that allows the trade to function without having the risk, the financial risk, transferred to the back of the trade and ultimately impact the farmers that all of the trade are buying from. Mr. McGreevy, do you have any comments? You and I have worked on some of these issues together.
Well, Gordon, I think that, you know, the fact remains, as was pointed out, is that the world population is growing. Is this one a little better? Oh, maybe. I don't know. Okay. Oh, man, I got 3 now. I feel like a... Anyway, so our world population is growing. We know that. You know, 7.5 billion people in 2017, 2050, 9.8 billion, up 31%. The sad part is we still have world hunger. You know, 815 million people, up from a year ago. 1 out of 10 people still going to bed hungry. So really the business of everyone in this room is feeding people. That's what we do. That's what we're doing at this conference. We are feeding people. And so everyone, right, in the world has to eat. Everyone. So we are all connected. And trade is what connects us all. And that's what this Colombo Accord is really all about. It's recognizing that we are all connected. And it's in our best interests, right, to trade with each other. So, you know, trade and innovation and working together are going to achieve solving the big problems that we face and certainly feeding a hungry planet. So every government, right, wants to protect its farmers and does so in a variety of ways. No dispute about that. Nobody on the panel here would dispute that. Everyone is going to try to protect their farmers, and it's a fact of life that politicians have to get elected, right? In every country, right, including the good old USA. But our job, right, as a multi-country coalition is to come together and educate our government officials that it is in their best interest, right, to have fair trading practices and disciplines, as Gordon has outlined. So we are going through a period here in the pulse industry of great suffering, right? We've had a market shock from our biggest market, but it's not just India. I speak from my own country, which is shaking up the trading world as we speak. Those of you who are in steel certainly understand that. So it's not just India, it's all countries, and we all have a responsibility as an organization and as a multi-country coalition to educate our elected officials on the ramifications, the long-term ramifications of the actions that they are taking. Because no politician and no government can predict the weather. And so if the weather goes south, and there's a big problem, there could be big shortages and a lot more hungry people. So I'll end my comments there.
I think one of the issues that we are all confronted with, the majority of the people in this room are confronted with, is undisputable. And I think the Colombo Accord
Put this on, yeah. Yeah, I think it's, we come one by one. Yeah. Now, first speaker was Gordon. Come here, Vijay, please. Yeah. First speaker is Gordon from Pulse Canada. Then we had Tim McGreevy from United States, from Trumpland. He spoke about the steel. That's why I had to open. You opened the Pandora box. I am sorry. And here is Vijay. Vijay is the president CEO of the AgroCorp, and he's Singapore representing the Singapore on our GPC board. He is a very valuable trader, and I have great respect to him. Vijay, I would like to have your opinion about this Colombo Accord and all the mess going around.
Good morning. I think a lot of the issues that are highlighted here under the Colombo Accord are something that the industry is now confronted with. And, you know, for somebody who's been involved in the industry for substantial periods of time, I think there have been other periods as well where we have been confronted with similar issues, though perhaps not of the magnitude that we are facing now. And I think as an industry, through a lot of the issues that have been highlighted here are issues that we need to raise. And, you know, while as Hussein mentioned, I am from Singapore. A substantial portion of the global trade of pulses goes through Singapore. And Singapore is one of the countries which has got the fairest and freest trade policies in place. Having said that, I think we've got to also look at what are the various issues that have resulted in the situation that we find ourselves. And I think, you know, we have to look at both consumers and producers at the same time and deal with the issues as they present themselves. And I think if you look at whatever various trades are confronted with, and this is not necessarily the pulse trade as such, governmental intervention and governmental issues are, you know, if you ask any trader what are the main issues that they think and they worry about when they sleep at night, and governmental intervention is the biggest issue that everybody is worried about. And governments tend to veer between producers and consumers from depending upon the issues that they are confronted with. The same Indian government that you're talking about 3 or 4 years ago reduced tariffs to zero, and they tried to get domestic prices down because they were worried about the consumer at that stage. Last year, they are faced with an overproduction, and they are worried now about the producer. So governments tend to veer between producers and consumers, and as an industry that is addressing and which is encompassing all stakeholders, I think we've got to be cautious about how we address the issue and make sure that whatever that we are discussing is equitable towards producer and consumer, and also enables us to bring all the stakeholders to the table. So my take on this is that while, you know, nobody can dispute any of the issues that have been highlighted, we have to be conscious of the reasons why some of the issues that have surfaced last year have been brought to the surface is because of you know, issues that are particular to that particular year, and these things generally, you know, after the overproduction will result in a supply side response and in a production response, which will make things equitable over time. The issues that we are raising as Colombo Accord is really something that needs to be highlighted. But I think at the same time, the issues that we face, we've got to focus on consumption as well. We've got to focus on production, and I think those also need to be highlighted as we as an industry confront the issues that we are facing.
Thank you, Vijay. While I was coming here, Sudhakar told me, Mr. Hussain, you should insist something. He says, world consumption is 3 grams per capita on pulses. So any fractional increase on this will have a huge effect in general consumption in our trade. I want to relay this message of Sudhakar Tomar. This is right, Sudhakar? Okay. So you relaxed now? Okay. So, I mean, this Colombo Accord is not against one country, and we are not against or focusing on one country decision. It came to affect because it started with some other countries, and this happened in India, and then it started to go back other countries. Like Pakistan started to have again plant quarantine restrictions and new decision about this. And Algerian government is decided that to open a letter of credit for any contracts for the pulses or other things. So imagine you are making a 10 container of business with the Algerian partners, and the guy, he doesn't have bank credit, but he has a cash, and he wants to pay, but he cannot open letter of credit, and then that's why he defaults. So these things are not limited with only today, because the magnitude is big in India, everybody's talked. This was talked before. So before this virus spreads, we have to do something as industry. That's why we brought here as a panelist some of the associations here. And now I would like to invite our Executive Vice President, Cindy Brown. And she's representing American Pulse Association. And Cindy would like to have your view on this Colombo Accord and about what's going on in this world about pulses. Thank you.
Thank you, President Hussein. You know, having the opportunity to participate in this is very important, and every one of you in this room is extremely important with your membership in Global Pulse Confederation, because as we look at trading and what we do as an industry, we cannot function just with our own individual countries. The Colombo Accord, as we look at our opportunities to work with many different trading partners and to take care of a world, thinking back to 2016 when we celebrated the International Year of the Pulse, we had a lot of ideas and goals, and much of it came back to the ability to increase consumption. But it also resonates with some of the other things that some of our members have talked about this morning. When we talk about feeding people, you know, every country in the world eats one type of a pulse or another. And my sector, which is primarily very focused on kidney beans, hasn't felt this trade distortion problem that's going on. But we certainly understand about food loss, food waste. And as we try to look at the population growth throughout the world and try to make sure through some of the principles of the International Year, whether it was sustainability in our production, whether it was trying to help small stakeholder farmers, many times women farmers, and especially if I call out some of the more of the developing countries, looking at water issues, and then coming back to what's really under our hat right now is trade issues. So there's a whole realm of different things that we as a trade association globally need to look at, to partner with our other nations and to have our governments come together and discuss and to make sure that what we're doing is free and open trade. So if we take some of the trade barriers like MRLs, and if we look at maximum residue levels, and we have different levels for just about every country in the world. I know many times we look at North America, and of course we don't have the same that we have in Canada and the US. And when we look to our export partners, or our international trade partners, it's all different. So how do farmers in the US compared to farmers in Africa know what they can use and what's the best method of using it? We have to rely on FAO, Codex, and as we look at limited funding in organizations such as that to bring together the harmonization of chemicals throughout the world so our producers have a fair shake in producing from one country to another and not have a surprise in a trade barrier that just all of a sudden shows up. How do we know the difference in some chemicals that might be naturally occurring versus something that's been put on? We don't have the science behind it. But I think our job as a trade association, and with something as important as the Colombo Accord, is to identify all of these areas and to come together and to find a way to work to help the production and all of the farmers that are working throughout the world, but to provide a safe product for our consumers. And as we know that we have a healthy product, we know that if people consume our product, their health will be better. We know the environment will be better. So working together globally to find solutions and to listen and understand, I think, is a real important factor. So as we have a Colombo Accord, it may be just the first point of creating more awareness for our governments to say, GPC, you're on the right track with trade, and we want to help you continue.
Thank you, Cindy, for your underlining some of the important issues, including the MRL. MRL, we mean the maximum residual level, and this is an important subject also for GPC. We are doing a lot of work and spending money and sources for the residual level. It's another issue in our world, and in that one we are working very closely with Ethiopia. And for Colombo Accord, I would like to call our good friend Theodros to the stage from Ethiopia. He is representing the EPOSPIA, which is the Ethiopian Pulse Confederation. They are our member. Come please forward here. He is a very good friend of mine from Ethiopia. He had a lot of time. He's spending a lot of effort for industry, and I would like to thank for all this effort he made for his country and for our industry. Yes, Theodros.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Al-Saran. Yeah, I'm from Ethiopia, we're second populated country in Africa. We are estimated around 120 million population. Almost 80% of the population is depending on agriculture. They are farmers. The country is agrarian economy. We are almost the 7th largest producer of chickpeas, 5th largest of faba beans. As mentioned earlier, because of these different policies and directives and regulations coming up from different countries where we are exporting our pulses, we have been really challenged and victimized because of these new policies which are coming up every day. Last time, as mentioned earlier, as an example, India and Pakistan are one of the largest destinations for our pulses. We have visited India last time, a month back, with a high officials delegation, and we had a chance to meet officials, the Ministry of Agriculture, ministers, and other officials, with the help of GPC as well. And we were discussing there, actually, even our government were mentioning that we respect their regulations, policies which are coming up to protect their poor farmers. However, they also need to consider when they come up with these new policies and regulations that there are farmers who are depending on their market, depending on their trade relation, which are related with the industry, who are dependent on this market, which they are now putting up to protect their poor farmers. Now we are being victimized. All African poor farmers are also victimized with these new policies. I think this Colombo Accord is a good mechanism to create a good dialogue and to create a good atmosphere between trade partners so that they can consider, whenever they put up new policies, they can consider all venues before putting up new policies. So I say Ethiopia is now very much interested to go with this Colombo Accord, and we all should endorse the Colombo Accord. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Theodoros. Theodoros is really working hard for his nation. I think they should make you a president or prime minister. Which one you like? I never seen such a nationalist and defending his country, and very hard worker and working for the industry too, of course. And do you know, there is a country, all countries, they change their name, they put different names, and there is one country in the world called Down Under. Do you know what is Down Under? Anyway, he will speak to himself. We have our next panelist from a country called Down Under representing, and he will talk about Colombo Accord. You know, the Peter Wilson is a very popular guy in our pulse industry and in Australia, and he likes to tweet a lot about politics and everything, and including the farm and food. And let's see where is he coming from. He's coming from Down Under. Thank you, Peter.
I promise not to sing the Men at Work song, okay? And it's refreshing not to be speaking behind chicken wire. I suspect if we're having this discussion at IPCA in February, we may have actually required chicken wire up the front here. I believe the Colombo Accord does enunciate a pretty solid framework for the pulse industry to get in behind a solid rules-based trading structure. But I think we need to accept some responsibility here as the industry, and certainly the national bodies have to accept some significant responsibility for the sorts of things that have occurred in the last 2-3 years with everything from raids on premises holding stock in parts of India to raids on companies to see whether companies have been involved in market manipulation, to demonetisation type issues, GST imposition, right through to tariffs and technical bans and quotas, etc. that we've seen in India. But of course, it's not just India, it's a whole host of countries that aren't necessarily, I guess, playing ball. I mean, recently Pakistan imposing restrictions, phytosanitary restrictions on things like ascochyta. Now we know Pakistan has ascochyta. Under a rules-based, science-based structure, they can't impose ascochyta presence as a limit to exporting product to their country. Furthermore, to fix it, they've allowed us to use a thumping amount of methyl bromide on the product. I think it's 80 grams per cubic metre, which flies in the face of the Montreal Protocol, which is suggesting we need to use less methyl bromide, not more. So I think there is responsibility and accountability across the board. Governments need to adhere to trade rules. There needs to be some significant transparency around at what point they will step in. There needs to be a science-based approach. And at the end of the day, the government must identify and enunciate where they believe market failure is occurring. We haven't really seen market failure occur in this pulse industry in the last 25 or 30 years. So I don't think it's just happened now. Prices move higher, they move lower. That doesn't necessarily follow that we have market failure. We're potentially setting ourselves up, and I suggest that the Indians are potentially setting themselves up for major market failure into the future. And if I can paraphrase our chairman, you shouldn't screw with the supply chain. The outcomes are absolutely scary to prophesise. We've potentially got a good segue into the discussion through the International Year of Pulses. The awareness of pulses and the importance of pulses has never been greater, in my opinion, ladies and gentlemen. So both importing countries and exporting countries recognise the significant value of pulses. And so I think we can lever off that as we get ourselves organised. Equally, I said from the start that I believe national industries, in fact national countries, have got to take more responsibility in driving home the benefits of free trade. You know, even in our country of Australia, we have a very, very large grains-based industry, grains, pulses and oilseeds, and pulses, I think, Tony Russell, number 2 behind wheat in terms of value to the agricultural economy in the grains sector. And yet we do have our grains industry market access people here today. It's Tony. It's one man. So even the Australian grains industry has not put enough effort behind or enough horsepower behind Tony's group to be able to really deal with the issues. And so I've been talking about for many years now the need to develop market maintenance, access and development. We need to spend a lot more money locally on market access, development and maintenance if we're really going to be able to take this industry forward. Essentially, more markets more often means that when we have these hiccups around the world, we can deal with them without it being a major disaster. To shut out 33% of the world consumption and trade base in the form of India is quite a massive shock to this industry. So we all have collective responsibility to act. I believe the Colombo Accord is a tremendous first step in harmonising all of the horsepower that's in this room, but all the national industries around the world.
Thank you, Peter. Peter is, he didn't mention he is from Australia. So next speaker, I would like to invite Brazil, Marcelo. Marcelo is president of Brazilian Pulse Association. What is the importance of Brazil for our industry? Can anyone reply this question? What is the importance of Brazil is that nobody knows. Actually, we told you, but next year we will hold the GPC conference in Brazil. And Marcelo is working on going to talk on Colombo Accord, but he is working very hard to host you in Brazil with beautiful landscape and the people of Brazil. He's going to expect you there. We have big expectation for Brazil, and I like to have this time his opinion about Colombo Accord.
Thank you, Mr. Arslan. And what the Brazilian people or the Brazilian market doing and is important too around the world. First, we are there 200 million people that love beans. This is true. Every day we have in the lunchtime some type of beans. These people discovering now recently the other pulses like chickpeas, lentils, peas, and like to them, we have the one big challenge there because first, the people never heard this term, pulses. Then, we teaching with the other persons there what is pulses, how work this market around the world, how is important for us import and export and participate in this market. Because a lot of growers and some researchers believe until now that it's important to produce carioca beans. But carioca beans is only for us. When we have one trouble with the weather and lose the crop, the prices do the people suffer because the prices can rise a lot. In 2016, the people paid around $4 per kilo. This is very, very high when you compare it with the historic price. The reason that this Colombo Accord is very, very interesting for us is put for us clear our mission and put easier our attention where our attention we need to put every day, the line to do this. To the government is new to this pulse term and the opportunities. The government in Brazil, until recently years, put attention only in big commodities, like soy and cotton and corn and coffee, but now discovering these possibilities, because if we have 200 million people that love beans, we have thousands and thousands growers that love produce beans. Then we have good opportunity to do one diversification there. If we have diversification in the future, the people will eat other types of beans, like specklet, dark-red kidney, moralubia, because if we have production there, when we need more beans, is a logic. We need to put focus and import and sometimes. Researchers, growers, and all people that is involved with pulses is grateful with this idea to receive now GPC there in 2019. We have one good opportunity to help GPC do maybe the big meeting there, because Brazil receives all people from all countries. It's easy to get a visa, it's not a problem. And we will prepare this. We care this with all our attention to receive all people from the world. Then we consume 17 kilos per year per capita. Never until now we had one campaign to increase this quantity. When appeared this campaign, the GPC put and called us about the 2016, the International Year Pulses, was a good surprise. And the effect was very, very good. Now, this year, the special year, and when we talk about pulses, the mentality, the people is changing. It's not the poor food. This is our food. This is an honor to us, Brazilian people, have this pulse, like beans, with the most important in our diet dairy. Then, what I can talk about the Colombo Accord. Welcome this line to follow, and thank you for accepting somebody like us, the young country and the pulses market around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. We will, after next panelist, we will go and Q&A session, questions and answer if you have. As you know, there is an application. You can ask through that application your questions. I noticed there is one question from Andrew Jacobs so far, and I like the question, so I put like. The most liked question goes front. So this will happen in all our sessions. So when you have questions, go in applications of Global Pulse Confederation. It's application, you can download it, and there is a live Q&A. It's very simple. Download, go to the live Q&A, print your question, type your question, and then we will see from here and we will reply. So we don't need to roam around the room to find out who is asking or who is not asking. But still, as we are an old traders, people that cannot conveniently use this application, we will be more than glad to receive the question from the floor too. So I would like to invite Argentina Clara President to this stage to have a talk about the Colombo Accord, whether they support or not. And Marcelo is an experienced pulse trader. He's been a long time in our execution board, and we are glad to see Argentina is also supporting Colombo Accord. Thank you, Marcelo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, as probably you know, we are a country which we produce a lot of different pulses, where we export, we process, but we are mainly farmers. And being farmers, and we are proud to be farmers and to feed part of the world. But what we have to take in consideration that the intervention of governments affect a lot the farming or the farmers everywhere, not only in Argentina. So we are here to fully support the accord, because we think that with fair trade, and if it's a good, sorry, I'm a little bit nervous, as you can see. What we would like to give us, or to give you, is the message that if we follow the rules of the accord, the life will be more easy. Everybody has a lot of things to do, have things that you can manage and things that you cannot manage. As an example, the weather you cannot manage, but if you fulfill the rules that the accord state, trade will be more easy, life will be more easy, and everybody can do a good job. So let's everybody, let's go to fulfill these things and try to sorry. I don't know, but I'm a little bit nervous because this accord is very important, and sorry, I don't know. No, sorry.
Thank you, Argentine and Marcelo, for the presentation and talk and support. And I like to have questions. Apparently, we have still one question supported by 3 people, liked by 3 people. One of them is me, that liked the Andrew questions, and I don't know who other 2. Oh, it became 4. Who is the 4th one? Huh? Who is the 4th like on the, you, oh, Merve, okay. If you don't have at least question, now you learn how to use this Slido applications. Huh? So the question is from Andrew, you can see on your app. Will the panel, oh, 6, very good. There is one question. Will the panel addresses food security, as surely Indian subcontinent is only one bad monsoon away from the food shortages? Yeah, now we have 8 likes on this question. You want to reply that? Yeah, let me tell one more and then you continue. That is very important. You know, when India has 20% less production, which is normal, this is becoming 5 million ton. You know, total production of second biggest country is Canada, is around 5 to 8 million. What is total pulse production in Canada, Gordon? 8. So can you imagine how important the Andrew question is. 20% reduction means a lot to the world. So they are playing with the fire. This is a very dangerous game. Everybody should think of it. 10% is 2 million tons, more than Turkish production, probably Russian production, and when you look at the desi production in Australia is around 1.5, and lentil, totally 2 million pulse production exists. So we are talking about big numbers. But when we say the shortage, we are talking about 10–20% less. This is the danger that Andrew liked to point out and underline, and thank you for his experience and question. Yes, Peter. You know, as a president, I am limiting sometimes, trying to control everything myself. Come.
I think the Indians are the only country on earth that legislate production and monsoon performance, but I think eventually that power is going to run out. We only about 2 or 3 years ago, they had major water shortages in a fair bit of northern India, and I follow the catchment storages. You know, in the world, we probably haven't hit peak food, but we're certainly getting close to peak water, and we know that the aquifers in India continue to deplete. So, you know, there needs to be a better system for rationing and developing food supply. So food security is going to be a lot more important, I think, for some of these bigger countries going forward. Andrew?
Yeah, while I am looking at my phone, don't worry, I am not making business or checking my emails. I am trying to check the questions. Yeah. The anonymous means name is not registered. My question to the panel is, should countries impose a regulation on an open contract which is en route to destination? This is for you, Gordon. You want me to read again?
I can read it here.
Okay, you can read it there. Oh, yeah, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I mean, I just was making some summary notes for wrapping up the discussion, and I think that I can't tell governments what to do, but what we need to do as the trade is to make sure that governments are aware that we have contractual laws and contractual agreements, and their actions have to be taking into account the contracts that already exist. And so, you know, I think the answer is that we have to work with government to find answers that appreciate that governments have obligations to do what's right for their people, but that we have to find ways that those government actions are consistent with contracts that are already in place. And I think there's no one specific answer, but clearly actions by government that completely ignore contracts that are in place cause economic harm to members of their own country, undermine the trust in that government and trade with that country, and ultimately impact everything from farmers, in the case of agricultural products, to consumers. So to me, one of the common themes about the Colombo Accord is really to say to government, you can do the right things, but do them in a way that makes sense to business as well.
Thank you, Gordon. I mean, my reply to this question would be, okay, we want minimum bill of lading to be, our minimum request is bill of lading date to be respected on this kind of regulations. Because, frankly speaking, it's on the water, it's going. And BL date today easily can be checked. You can check the vessel, when was in the port and when left the port. It is for the government, it is easy to understand and verify this information. I believe the minimum request has to be not only letter of credit, but also the bill of lading date. We are not in the previous times of years. Everybody can check on the internet whether this date is true or this vessel was on this port and actually whereabout. And another question is from Ibrahim. What GPC is doing to help African farmers in pulse production? Okay, we bought some combines to go to Africa to harvest the products. No, it is not the way we work. Like from Africa, you are from Africa, Theodorus? Yeah. Yeah, so you see, we put a global perspective. Although this is not related with our sessions, but everybody should understand that what we are doing, we are supporting farmers and small farmers. And when I went to Burkina Faso, especially there, I saw the success of the black farmers and also the women. Is very important in Africa. I think the numbers they were giving me, 60% of the farmers in Burkina Faso was the woman. So it is important that we support the production also in Africa. But this cannot be done only with the GPC help. We need also government's help in this point. So what we are doing is that we are trying to use our influence on the government by explaining the importance of the pulses to grow and the value of the pulses for the environment, for the land. That doesn't mean that it has no value for the land, because you will use less fertilizer, and this will develop sustainable agriculture in the world. So I think all these things, we should use our influences on all the countries without looking at whether this is Africa or this is Canada or this is Australia. For us, there is one planet. And this planet, we have to take care of this planet. And we believe this planet can be only preserved and sustainable agriculture can only be made through a production of pulses. So we are, yeah, Theodorus.
Let me just add a few things on this. If I understand the question properly, I think GPC understands the importance of African farmers and farming. It's true. Africa will be the major producer of pulses and other agricultural producers as well. GPC is helping African farmers in their producers to have quality products, to produce quality products, to export quality products, to supply to the world a better products, to produce to the farmers better products. For example, we can mention one thing which GPC is doing for Ethiopia, for example, on maximum residual level, which have been our farmers with having less knowledge on application of chemicals, fumigants. GPC, in coordination with the Ethiopian government, is doing a lot of jobs to create awareness of the usage of chemicals in production, in the producers of, for example, pea beans, which is going to European Union. So GPC is helping in a lot, in many ways, the African farmers. I just wanted to add this.
Thank you very much, Theodorus. I mean, we do a lot, but in Africa and influencing the governments. But we should, like my last year, I've been 5 countries in Africa. But I don't see it as Africa. I've been 8 times to India. So we are going on the, taking not by the continent. We are looking at the interest of the pulse industry and interest of the farmers. So this is the basis. So I don't want to go and name it by the continent. And we have a question from Christian Amu Chastegui. This is the most like now. It is. It had received. She received 6 like. Can explain how Colombo Accord going to operate to get their goal. Yes, Cindy. Okay, I can reply if you want.
So, how the Colombo Accord will operate. It's our goal as GPC to put together a document that we can all agree on. We would look for the 25 plus trade associations that belong to GPC to take the accord back to their membership and have signatures and buy-in that they agree with this. And from that point, we need to go to our governments and go to the trade organizations and make sure that everyone's aware of what we feel and what's important to our trade as a whole. How else do you see it, Hussein?
Yeah. I mean, this is how the system works. The system is, as Global Pulse Confederation, through our member associations, we are going to insist our government at the bilateral level and at WTO level to discuss these matters with all the participants. So we should talk at the high level to have use of the Colombo Accord. Because if you, as a GPC, we have a lot of leverages. One of the important leverages is that we have a lot of countries. We can bring together the countries even in a war because they have a common interest. So for this common interest, we will bring all these countries together on one frame agreement, which is, we call it Colombo Accord. And another question is, what representation have been made to the Indian government and what has been their reaction? Forget about GPC's approach to the Indian government. Last time, Trudeau went there to talk about this, and then before even Mr. President Putin is also talked about this with the Indian government. So we are talking why they are doing this, why Trudeau had this in agenda, why Mr. President Putin had this in agenda. This is the way you should approach to the thing. This is the power of our industry. Means our industry members worked properly. Like Theodoros, he went to, when you were in India, Theodoros? Last month, he was with his minister and our GPC secretary, director, Randy Duckworth. They were together in India last month to talk with the Indian government about this problem. So we are extensively working. We are doing our best to warn them about the problems that would come in the future and would negatively infect their countries. And then next is okay. There is one at the bottom. What kind of consequences could we imagine for countries or companies who violate the Colombia? No, this is not Colombia Accord. This is Colombo Accord. Colombia Accord use, maybe we can do one day GPC there. So this is, I think that's all that I could see. MRL issues, it's another thing we will discuss, the MRL things. And do we have time to take more questions? We have? Okay. We have, because the clock here is, I don't know, it went to 0 and we went to the plus, so I don't know. So should we impose a regulation? I have to follow from here. Yeah, if there is no other, yeah, they say here one of the important why we don't see Chinese representative either. We wrapped up here all these people, and then yesterday we discussed the Colombo Accord in our executive committee board. We had the input of the Chinese, and I'm glad to see CFNA president is here. And they also put their input into the subject, and hopefully they will also support Colombo Accord, because we've seen positive reaction from our friends from China, because CFNA is the Federation of Chamber of Commerce of China, so it is a partly official body that we can see. So I want to have a wrap-up session, unless you want to see some reply to the question. Or can you do this, Gordon, for me, to wrap up the things, and then if we see any other question we should reply, you can.
Well, thank you, Mr. Arslan. It's a privilege to wrap up some comments about the section. You know, the Global Pulse Confederation, our organization, has risen in stature and importance on a global basis, starting with the development of the International Year of Pulses, where we spent a lot of time promoting pulse consumption. We encouraged expansion of production in markets around the world, holding special research programs in Africa, in various countries in Africa, as we try to encourage both consumption and production of pulses. And I think as we become very successful, we attract attention to our industry, and sometimes governments react with policies. And I think that the Colombo Accord is our effort to continue to expand this industry. It is our strategy for growth. We'll continue to work on encouraging consumption of pulses. We'll continue to encourage production of pulses, and we need to encourage now trade policies that will be part of this growth strategy for our industry. And as an industry itself, we need to bring disciplines through Global Pulse Confederation Contract Number 1. So Colombo Accord is really trying to tackle our opportunities and our barriers to growth. The Colombo Accord is really saying that the pulse trade, our group, can play an important part in the private-public partnership in policies. Policy is not just the realm of government. It's our responsibility to work with government to make sure that those policies are working well for their consumers, for their farmers, and for the businesses that make the economies of all countries go forward. So the Colombo Accord says that our organization, the Global Pulse Confederation, will work collaboratively and in cooperation with governments to achieve predictable and transparent policies that adhere to international trade agreements. We want to work with governments to ensure that there is a fit between their actions and the contracts that our industry has already signed. And we need to find ways to make sure that government action does not transfer risk and cost to the private sector. We want to work with governments to take a harmonized approach on food safety issues, and we've addressed MRLs. We want to work with government so that they take a harmonized approach on environmental protection issues, like the International Plant Protection Convention. And we need to be ensured that we're working to address policy changes that we can anticipate, such as novel plant breeding techniques like CRISPR-Cas9, and how those kinds of innovations will be regulated and how they'll affect our trade. And finally, we want to make sure that all of these harmonized approaches are based on science, based on rationale, and are less subject to the political will of certain parties at certain countries at certain times. We want to foster rules-based trade. And why? Because our industry can play an important role in serving social and economic goals of countries and of the world in its entirety. We, working with government, can provide a service to consumers, to farmers in developing countries, as well as the role that trade can play in addressing food security. You know, I'll close my comment by saying I was very struck with the quote that was put on the board earlier in the opening ceremony for this conference. and I quickly did a search to see where this brilliance came from. And the quote that was featured in the opening session for this GPC convention said that sustainability is no longer about doing less harm, it is about doing more good. And this quote really struck me because it is the opportunity of the pulse industry to do more good. And I think that the Colombo Accord is going to launch us in that direction. So, Mr. President, thank you for having the panel come up and talk about this, because this really is our plan for growth for the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Gordon. There was one question I didn't feel very well because I didn't reply. I mean, I should reply anyway. This MRL, like we are working with Ethiopia on MRL specifically. The MRL usage, farmers are not informed. Yes, the farmers are not informed because farmers are using this fumigants, or let's say this pesticide and herbicides. They don't know the consequences. They are spending a lot of money. Actually, they are poisoning their products. With Ethiopian government, now we are working on it to inform at the farm level to do this. There are regulations, and we are spending a lot of money as a Global Pulse Confederation on MRL levels. Now we got a subscription, like we will spend $25,000 only to get the MRL levels accepted by each countries in the world. So the MRL work is going on, don't worry. We will pursue in every avenue that is necessary for the pulses. And before the closing of this panel, I would like to tell you that around 3 o'clock, we are expecting Sri Lankan president to be here. So if you pay attention, and there is lunch now, and after also I will be here. I am waiting to see you for the Global Pulse GPC contract too. So have a nice lunch and see you in the afternoon. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you, panel. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Thank you, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a historic accord. Before you leave for lunch, please wait with me for 2 minutes. You're 15 minutes ahead of schedule. I'll take 3 minutes to tell you about lunch. Since this was a historic accord, may I request the panel to please give us a memento photograph in front of the stage right here. Mr. Arslan, President, sir. With the panel, it's been a historic accord. We need a good photograph. Big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great initiative, the Colombo panel, for the industry. Please stay with me for 2 minutes because there are very important announcements I need to make, so I'll do that. And once again, great panel. And I request the panel as they leave the stage to please exit, not from the center of the stage, but from the right-hand side of the stage, from your right, ladies and gentlemen. Got to remind you that as we head for lunch, a couple of important things, of course, wear your badges to have lunch accessibility quickly. Also to remind you that we are for the very first time live on YouTube, so be on your best behavior. Remember to contact with us, get in touch with us on Twitter. Our Twitter feed is SizzleZipTech. Our Instagram is Global Pulses. To remind you, there's free Wi-Fi while you're in the hotel. Just log on to Shangri-La and the Wi-Fi is free anywhere all across the hotel. For questions, always get on to www.slido.com, Slido or Slido.com, #Pulses2018. I'd like to remind you that lunch is being sponsored by Lanka Agro. We are a little ahead of schedule, but we will not be stopping for tea or coffee anytime during the day today, and we didn't earlier. I did notice that during my walk in the foyer, lots of people were in the foyer area. So you're enjoying the beautiful tea and coffee served by Shangri-La, and for that we have to thank our tea and coffee sponsor, Yanam. Tea and coffee sponsored also today by Yanam Exports. And ladies and gentlemen, Yanam Imports rather. And ladies and gentlemen, just to remind you that while you're having lunch, have a great lunch. But remember, if you hear this sound, can we play that sound again? Thank you. If you hear this sound, this means this is the sound of an elephant trumpeting. What does that mean? It means the elephants are hungry and they're going to come rushing through. So if you hear that sound, please leave the lunch area, come right back here because we will start the next session. Don't wait for the elephants. All right, ladies and gentlemen, bon appetit, have a good time. Lunch is being served at the Lotus Ballroom 1. and the Ginger Room, which is one flight down. Use the escalator or the elevators. We'll see you very quickly. Back on lunch, back from lunch on schedule. We have a packed program. So once again, do wear your delegate badges prominently. Lunch is one floor down at the Lotus Ballroom 1 or the Ginger Room. You can take a choice. You will hear the sound of the elephant trumpeting. That is your last and final call to join us here. And we'll start immediately post-lunch. Once again, we'd like to thank Lanka Agro for sponsoring lunch and for tea and coffee all through the day, running tea and coffee, Yanam Imports. That's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you back after lunch. Thank you.